If you're confused about which black ink to use when you're coloring stamped images, stay tuned. I've got some tips for you. Hi, this is Sage Kimball, and I'm the Mad Stamper, with more technique tips for card makers and paper crafters. When you put a lot of time into coloring a stamped image, you want it to look great. So it's important to choose the right ink for the coloring technique you'll be using. The first challenge is to get an evenly inked image with photopolymer or clear stamps. You don't usually have uneven coverage problems with rubber stamps, but if you do, the same tips will work with them. I'm using this image from Butterfly Basics, which is especially challenging because of the fine line details in the center. You can often get an incomplete image with large photopolymer stamps, as in this example. In large part, this is due to the fact that clear stamps don't have the cushioning that rubber stamps do because they have this layer of foam under the rubber. When you apply a large photopolymer stamp to cardstock, the center part doesn't always make good contact. The solution is to add some layers of craft foam underneath your work. Another trick is to add some extra pressure in the center of the block so it makes better contact. With watercolor paper, this problem can be even worse. At least cardstock flexes, but watercolor paper is stiffer, and the extra pressure can be helpful. Black StazOn is my favorite for coloring images, but hardest to get good coverage when stamped. I re-ink this pad regularly, and I was really disappointed with these results. I added more ink to the pad and let it sit for a few minutes to soak into the felt, and then stamped again. Here's what I got. And the ink pad was still too wet, and so I lost some of the fine line detail in the center here, plus the image is just too dark. 2 days later, I stamped the same image with a little extra pressure on the block. The detail is excellent, although some of the image is still a bit dark. But on this side, I didn't use the extra pressure, and the image, as you can see, is too light. This is watercolor paper. Here's StazOn 2 days after inking the pad on cardstock. And I didn't use any extra pressure on the block. This image is perfect. The second challenge that you have with coloring techniques is adding color without smudging the black ink. Let's look at how StazOn holds up with two different coloring techniques. I used a paintbrush and applied water to this flower. You can see there isn't any smudging of the lines in it. When you use a blender pen and inks, you don't always get the same results because the fluid in the pen is not just water. It also contains glycerin and a bit of alcohol. I found some inks run more with a blender pen than watercoloring. StazOn did well with both techniques. Now let's look at Stampin' Up's Basic Black Archival ink. In terms of ink coverage, I did this one without extra pressure on the block and this one with that extra pressure. On this image, I used a blender pen without any ink on this leaf, and you can see the smudged ink. It's not as noticeable once you add color, but the smudging is still there. On this image, I brushed water without any ink on this flower. And you can see the Archival ink did bleed sort of a gray color. Again, it's not as noticeable when you add color. And I think it looks better than the smudges I got with the blender pen. Also, there's less smudging with the watercolor paper than with the cardstock. The last ink is Memento Tuxedo Black. It gave me a fine image on the first try without any extra pressure on the block, both on the cardstock and on the watercolor paper. I painted this large flower with just water and a clean brush, and the ink ran a light pink color. It's not very noticeable when ink was added to the brush, or when I used the blender pen and ink. Use the link provided if you want to download a PDF with a summary of these findings. Thanks for watching. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and leave me a comment. For more inspiration and instructions, be sure to sign up for my newsletter at www.stampingmadly.com. And don't miss another great video. Subscribe to the Mad Stamper YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button now.